So my mom was never one to go to expensive restaurants. If we went out to dinner, we went to the cheapest restaurant in town, and we were well trained to order the cheapest thing on the menu. It took me years to crack that. The other thing you should know about my mom is that me and my mom had a rough go of it for years, for decades. For decades. We fought tooth and nail. As a teenager, I screamed, "I hate you," I slammed doors, I threatened to run away. I can remember standing at the door saying, if I had the money, and if I had a place to go, I would run away, but I can't. So I'm stuck here to suffer with you. And I many, many times told her I wished she was dead. And as an adult, it got better, but every time I went home for a holiday or a visit, we did okay for a little while, and then there was one blowout fight that just shattered us both. That went on from the time I was 13 until I was about 43. So this one Christmas, I'm home for Christmas, and my mother is taking me and my sisters out to the bistro. And the bistro is the one expensive restaurant in our small Midwestern town, and this is a big deal. We are going to the bistro. So that morning, I'm up in my childhood bedroom, I'm snuggled in under the comforter, I'm sleeping in, all is well, and I hear this sound. And it's a sound I have never heard before. It's thud. It's just this singular thud. It's like a one-syllable sound, and it's louder and unfamiliar. Thud. There's no swearing, there's no cry for help, there's no reverberation through the house. It's just this thud. And I think, well, nobody cried for help. It must mean everything's okay. And then I thought, nobody called for help. I'd better go see what happened. So I go downstairs, and I go down the hallway towards the kitchen, and as I approach the kitchen, I see the clock on the wall, and it's 20 to 10. And as I walk around into the kitchen, I see a chair knocked over on the floor. I see a broken light bulb on the floor. I see my mom face down on the floor, passed out with a pool of blood around her head. And I look at the clock, it's 20 to 10. I'm in Ohio, the sky is gray, my feet are on the ground, my belly is still, and I think, is this the part where my mother dies? Is this how it happens? Is this the story we tell? It was Christmas, we were gonna go to the bistro, Mom was changing a light bulb, the chair slipped out from under her. And I look at the clock, it's 20 to 10, and my mom is face down on the floor, and her body is so soft. It's so soft. Her fingers are curled under as her hand rests on the floor in the shape of a gun. But it's not a gun, it's her hand. All the judgment and blame and anger is gone from her body. It's so soft. My dad is on his knees right next to her, and he's in shock, and he's saying, she's not responding, she's not responding, she's not responding. Over and over he says, she's not responding. Janet, honey, she's not responding, she's not responding. And I look at the clock, and it's still 20 to 10. And for once, I don't wish my mother was dead. And then the clock moves, and I step past my dad and over her body, and I pick up the phone, and I call 911, and I say, there's been an accident, my mother, she fell. And I turn around, and my mother comes to, and she sees she looks at my dad on the floor. She says, Harold, what are you doing on the floor? Get up off the floor. And I say, Mom, you fell. We've called the paramedics, they're on their way. And she says, you called the paramedics? No, I don't need the paramedics. Mary Lou and Evelyn are gonna be standing at the window thinking Janet Walker had a heart attack. I'm fine, we don't need the paramedics. And in that moment, the paramedics arrive. And so they come into the kitchen and they start taking the form, and we're taking the form, and I'm giving him all the information, name, address, date of birth. And the minute he says date of birth, my mother says, I don't tell anybody my date of birth. And so we continue talking, and they examine her, and he says, Mrs. Walker, we're going to have to take you to the hospital. And she sits up and she says, I'm not going to the hospital. I have a lunch date with my daughters. And I say, Mom, there's blood pouring out of your head. You're going to go to the hospital. We can go to the bistro another day. So they take her to the hospital. She gets 3 layers of stitches in her head. That night, we bring Chinese food, and we eat Chinese food in the hospital room with her. And the next day, when she comes home, I lay her on the living room floor, and I hold her head in my hand. And the next week, every day, I hold my mother's head in my hands. And over the next 15 years, my mother and I fall in love. And she becomes my biggest fan. And I get to see what a hero she is. And since that day when the chair slipped out from under her, we never had another fight again. A few years ago, when my dad was in hospice, I was home in Ohio, and it was her birthday, and I said, we had never taken that rain check. We had never made it. It was 10 years later, and we'd never made it to the bistro. So I said, hey, Mom, how about we go to the bistro for lunch for your birthday? And she says, no, I don't want to spend the money. So we make lunch, we bring it out to the garden in the backyard, which might be the most beautiful place on the planet. We bring my dad out from his hospice bed, and he sits in the garden with us. My brother and my niece come over, and we have a lunch, and we spend the afternoon together telling stories. And there's a moment where my mother sits back in her chair, and she says, who needs the bistro? This is the best birthday I've ever had.